Our next reading is Lesson of a Lifetime, Part 3 of 3 by Stephen G. Bloom. First we'll start with some vocabulary. First we've got the phrase in a similar vein, which means in a similar way. To counter stereotypes means to fight against stereotypes. Empathy is to feel another person's emotions or feelings. And remarkable means amazing. Next we have compelling, which means generates interest. Betrayed is a break in trust of someone. Nurturing is to create a caring feeling for someone, especially children. And inoculation is an injection to prevent an illness like polio. Next we have sense of renewal, which is a feeling of having a fresh start. Fertile, which means ripe or ready to produce new life. And finally, bountiful crops, which are strong and healthy plants that produce food, like beans or corn. Now I'm going to read through the article for you. Lesson of a Lifetime, Part 3 of 3 by Stephen G. Bloom. The corn grows so fast in northern Iowa, from seedling to 7-foot high stalks in 12 weeks, that it crackles. In the early morning, dew and fog cover the acres of gently swaying stalks that surround Riceville the way water surrounds an island. The tallest structure in Riceville is the water tower. The nearest traffic light is 20 miles away. The Hangout Bar and Grill, the Riceville Pharmacy, and Touch of Dutch, a restaurant owned by Mennonites, line Main Street. In a grassy front yard down the block is a hand-lettered sign, Glad's for sale, 3 for $1. Folks leave their cars unlocked. Keys in the ignition. Locals say that drivers don't signal when they turn because everyone knows where everyone else is going. Most Riceville residents seem to have an opinion of Elliot, whether or not they've met her. It's the same thing over and over again, Cross says. It's Riceville 30 years ago. Some people feel we can't move on when you have her out there hawking her 30-year-old experiment. It's the Jane Elliott machine. Walt Gableman, 83, was Riceville's mayor for 18 years, beginning in 1966. She could get kids to do anything she wanted them to do, he says of Elliot. She got carried away by this possession she developed over human beings. A former teacher, Ruth Setka, 79, said she was perhaps the only teacher who would still talk to Elliot. I think 3rd grade was too young for what she did. Junior high, maybe? Little children don't like uproar in the classroom, and what she did caused an uproar. Everyone's tired of her. I'm tired of hearing about her and her experiment and how everyone here is a racist. That's not true. Let's just move on. Steve Harnick, 62, served as the elementary school principal beginning in 1977. I don't think this community was ready for what she did, he said. Maybe the way to sell the exercise would have been to invite the parents. And to talk about what she'd be doing. You must get the parents first. Dean Weaver, 70, superintendent of Rice schools from 1972 to 1979, said, "She'd just go ahead and do things. She was a local girl, and the other teachers were intimidated by her success. Jane would get invited to go to Timbuktu to give a speech. That got the other teachers angry." For years, scholars have evaluated Elliot's exercise, seeking to determine if it reduces racial prejudice in participants or poses a psychological risk to them. The results are mixed. 2 education professors in England, Ivor F. Goodson and Pat Sykes, suggest that Elliot's experiment was unethical because the participants weren't informed of its real purpose beforehand. Alan Charles Core, a professor of history at the University of Pennsylvania, says Elliot's diversity training is Orwellian and singled her out as the Torquemada of thought reform. Kors writes that Elliot's exercise taught blood guilt and self-contempt to whites, adding that, in her view, nothing has changed in America since the collapse of Reconstruction. In a similar vein, Linda Seebach, a conservative columnist for the Rocky Mountain News, wrote in 2004 that Elliot was a disgrace and described her exercise as sadistic, adding, "You would think that any normal person would realize that she had done an evil thing, but not Elliot. She repeated the abuse with subsequent classes and finally turned it into a fully commercial enterprise." Others have praised Elliot's exercise in building moral intelligence, the 7 essential virtues that teach kids to do the right things, Educational psychologist Michelle Borda says it teaches our children to counter stereotypes before they become fully fledged, lasting prejudices, and to recognize that every human being has the right to be treated with respect. Amitai Etzioni, a sociologist at George Washington University, says the exercise helps develop character and empathy. And Stanford University psychologist Philip G. Zimbardo writes in his 1979 textbook, Psychology and Life, that Eliot's remarkable experiment tried to show how easily prejudiced attitudes may be formed and how arbitrary and illogical they can be. Zimbardo, creator of the also controversial 1971 Stanford prison experiment, which was stopped after college student volunteers acting as guards humiliated students acting as prisoners, says Eliot's exercise is more compelling than many done by professional psychologists. Eliot defends her work as a mother defends her child. You have to put the exercise in the context of the rest of the year. Yes, that day was tough. Yes, the children felt angry, hurt, betrayed, but the return to a better place. Unlike a child of color who gets abused every day and never has the ability to find him or herself in a nurturing classroom environment. As for the criticism that the exercise encourages children to distrust authority figures, the teacher lies, then recants the lies, and maintains they were justified because of a greater good. She says she worked hard to rebuild her students' trust. The exercise is an inoculation against racism, she says. We give our children shots to inoculate them against polio and smallpox, to protect them against the realities in the future. There are risks to those inoculations too, but we determine that those risks are worth taking. Eliot says the role of a teacher is to enhance students' moral development. That's what I tried to teach, and that's what drove the other teachers crazy. School ought to be about developing character, but most teachers won't touch that with a 10-foot pole. Eliot and I were sitting at her dining room table. The smell of crops and loam and topsoil and manure wafted through the open door. Outside, rows of corn stretched to the horizon. There's a sense of renewal here that I've never seen anywhere else, Eliot says. It occurs to me that for a teacher, the arrival of new students at the start of each school year has a lot in common with the return of crops each summer. Eliot continues, just when you think that fertile soil can sprout no more, another season comes around, and you see another year of bountiful crops, straight and tall. It makes you proud.